Mm-hmm.
Welcome guys, gals and non-binary pals to this week's episode of Buffy Boys, your regular retrospective on Buffy the Vampire Slayer from a queer, literary and feminist perspective. My name is Joel, I'm one of your hosts, and with me as always is your other penultimate host,
Brian. Hi, how's it going?
Welcome.
What's the second penultimate? I think that is a phrase too. Proto-penultimate? Something like that?
Are you making this is an incredibly specific joke that is only...
I am not making a joke.
Anti-penultimate.
Anti-penultimate.
What are you referring to?
I didn't know the word.
Oh, okay, this used to be like a whole thing in my job where there used to be a whole thing they kept referring to anti-penultimate year of your degree, and I was like, just say second. Yeah. there's no need to do that. Anyway, okay, we're here to talk about Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And Brian, what's the most exciting Buffy thought you've had this week?
The most exciting... Well, we watched the prom.
We actually, of our own volition,
yeah,
drunkenly put on the prom. And
we need to stop telling people when we've done stuff drunkenly, because they're going to put the numbers together and be like, they drunkenly watch a lot. Do they soberly watch anything? And the answer is no.
Well, literally on our website it still says that we watched the episodes and recorded this podcast with wine, which was the original premise of the podcast.
I remember at one point one of our friends texted us during the actually it was when we were talking about the Joss Whedon stuff, when that initially broke, the Cordelia, the Charisma Carpenter stuff more appropriately, but and he texted us about something during it. I think it was Nicholas Brendan's response. And he was like shocked to find out that we were recording during the daytime, because his memory was that like we recorded before getting Chinese while drinking beer, which I think was great. You know, it was wonderful, but also it didn't work time wise for us. It was
definitely a whole vibe for certain. This is a different thing.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so this week on Buffy Boys, in terms of our bronze banter, let's start off with something light and fluffy / deeply depressing. We went to see, not last Thursday, but the Thursday before, a movie which no one else has heard of and no one else is talking up. A little movie called Everything Everywhere All at Once, directed by the Daniels.
Yeah, little independent flick.
It is independent. It is A24's biggest grossing movie of all time, beating stuff like The Witch. I think another big one was Uncut Gems. So Joel, tell me what you thought about that.
Yeah, so I have been known to occasionally be hyperbolic when I have a very positive cinema experience. As you will never forgive me for, I did go to see that World War I film 1917 and say it was a 9.7 when I walked out. And it was
This is a week after you gave Knives Out a 7.8,
which I've rescinded. I think I was just impressed by the moving pictures and had a whole experience. But
I think you also don't have much experience with war movies.
So I don't watch a lot of war movies.
No, my dad watches a lot of war movies, so I would have watched a lot of war movies, which means that you can kind of see when something's not. I don't think that movie was derivative by any stretch of imagination, but it wasn't like, you know, it had a shtick, but otherwise it wasn't hugely influential or like important as war movies go. You know?
Yeah, it was baby's first war movie. It was like very like, oh, this reminds me of Captain America, but. That being said, I do think I had an objectively very, very positive experience going to see Everything Everywhere All at Once, to the extent that when I left the cinema, I said to you, I know this is my first impression, and I know this, you know, will settle over time, but I feel like I may have seen the best film I've ever seen. I felt very, very positive.
I think what you said was the best film you've ever seen in the cinema, which I think, you know, I don't think you're trying to suggest that you prefer it to like your favorite movies.
Yeah, sorry, it's the best cinema experience I've ever had, and also just one of the most like transformative, engaging, wonderful films. So it's in some ways incredibly simple and incredibly difficult to sum up at the same time, but
it is Michelle Yeoh
vehicle 100%. I
saw some interviews with her. Apparently when she read the script initially, she cried because this is the movie she's been waiting her whole life to make. In some ways, she's been waiting for someone to finally write something like this, which is a movie about a middle-ish aged, kind of like 50-year-old Chinese American woman Chinese woman living in America. I'm not sure she'd identify as Chinese American. She comes from China, who is living her life, not sure what's happening, why she is being stuck in her life. And then time traveling multiverse stuff happens, through which we explore this deep existential ennui and dread, and a practical everyday response to nihilism via like positive absurdism, which I think is probably a spoiler, but also not really. It is deeply a movie about family. It features Kei Kwan, also known as Jonathan K. Kwan. I think probably initially known as that in terms of like trying to make his name more Western acceptable, but who would have been most well known for playing Short Round in Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, and also he was in the Goonies. I don't know his name of the character actually in that, but I've only seen the Goonies maybe 3 or 4 times when I was quite young. And also it stars Jenny Slate in a more minor role, and more importantly Stephanie Hsu. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Probably not. But who we know best from being incredibly charming and deeply beautiful and wonderful and funny in The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. She's going out with Joel, the husband. And in this, she is the daughter. There is nothing I can say about this movie except that it is a barrage of emotion and sound and light and explosive and like wonderfulness. It does what, like, it bombards the audience in a completely intentional way. It is funny, touching, exciting, dramatic. There's an extended in the mood for love reference in it, which I really deeply loved. I don't even know where to start with the movie. It is beautiful, wonderful. I can't recommend it enough. Yeah,
it was absolutely stunning thing to see in the cinema. It is a kind of an almost effortless, maybe the best ever use of the concept of the multiverse. And
I would say literally yes.
Specifically, to give some semblance of a plot to it. So essentially, you have this main character, this family dynamic, and Michelle Yeoh's character gets caught up in a multiversal war, which is happening across all dimensions and different versions of herself, and gains the power to draw on the experiences of her other selves by slipping into these other dimensions. And
Jamie Lee Curtis is in it as well.
Oh yeah, Jamie Lee Curtis is in a major role. Everyone forgets how funny Jamie Lee Curtis is. She's wonderful in this. Very touching. And also James Hong, who is a veteran Asian actor in Hollywood, who was being, like, off the top of my head, like Big Trouble in Little China and Wayne's World or two of his more comedic roles, but he's been in everything for forever.
Michelle Yeoh, by the way, if you don't know, was in Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. We would have known her best most recently for being in Star Trek Discovery, and she's just wonderful. Yeah. She is a wonderful actress. She is one of the most beautiful people who's ever lived, I would say.
No, absolutely. And the film has extensive...
I always comment women's appearance, and it's such a bad habit. I just love to boost women and their wonderfulness, but I need to stop commenting on people's women's appearance as one of my primary...
It's not the first thing you say.
No, I know, but I need to stop doing it as one of my primary reactions to women. It diminishes. I think it's one of the factors of a lot of these people, especially in Hollywood, but and especially with Asian women who are often overlooked in terms of their beauty and stuff like this. But I also don't think that it needs to be one of the first things I say, so it's a bad habit. I need to go over it. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, well, equally, Jonathan K. Kwong in this and some of the scenes is absolutely dashing and handsome.
Adorable.
Yeah,
as well.
Incredible. So I think it is a truly, truly wonderful, the Kung Fu films that Michelle Yeoh would have been originally known for, and which Jonathan K. Kwong would have choreographed for a long time, and like a great example of that. But
it's also he's considering it his comeback, which I am so excited for. Please cast him in everything you can.
It's a deeply kind film. It's very fun, and I wept openly at many parts of it, but also on a dime turned into some of the funniest, simultaneously heartwarming and funniest scenes. And actually, one of the best endorsements I can say is there was one part of it with Jamie Lee Curtis where I was laughing so uncontrollably I thought I'd have to step outside for a few minutes because I felt disruptive.
Yeah, it was wonderful. We both walked out of it and said we would give it a 10 out of 10 tentatively. I don't think I've given a movie... I have given a movie, it's not that important. I don't think I've emotionally felt like I've seen a 10 out of 10 movie in the cinema since Moonlight, probably, or Moonlight, and Manchester by the Sea. Though Portrait of a Lady on Fire is also a 10 out of 10 for me.
Yeah, we watched that in our same room, so.
Yeah, we did. Okay, the other thing I wanted to talk about is much darker, and like, just a trigger word kind of ish, not trigger word, content warning here for like abuse and domestic violence. I would say, just FYI, nothing crazy. I'm not going to go into any details. But
this makes it sound like it's about us.
So everyone's been watching the Amber Heard Johnny Depp trial, and I was like, oh, should we talk about this at some point on the podcast? Probably not. It's like, it seems like a messy, complicated thing that I won't get too into. And I had this like very unnerving feeling that at some point during us recording this whole thing, that Johnny Depp came up, presumably in relation to the Fantastic Beasts movie. And I think I might have said at the time, oh, well, that whole thing is kind of complicated. Amber Heard seems to have not been a great person either. Mm. I have a memory of doing this. If I didn't say it, I certainly thought that. So what I want to say today specifically is that I've been doing a lot of reading around all this. And it seems like we are in the middle of like a massive, massive, disgusting, misogynist like splurge when it comes to social media and journalism, specifically towards this woman, Amber Heard. I made you watch a video about it.
Yeah.
What do you think of it?
Yeah, I think this is the kind of thing which I definitely often feel under-equipped to speak with nuance on. And I'm very, I suppose, in favor of thinking I don't necessarily have to have an opinion if I don't know what I'm talking about.
Exactly.
And yes, from this and from what you've shared with me and from what I'm seeing around it, it seems like, kind of a straightforward situation where it's a like a deeply abusive and a deeply difficult relationship and a deeply difficult situation regardless, but that the coverage of it, the perception of it, in the main is definitely misogynistic against Amber Heard, regardless of the whatever contribution or flaws she may have had as a person, that the main coverage is misogynistic. But also that's the area maybe where you can debate and have a difference of opinion, but then outside of it there's this huge, completely indefensible, as you say, splurge of like memes and jokes and like hateful, heartless commentary and behavior around it, which is deeply indefensible, I think. Yeah,
the way it came into my like kind of eyesight was that I saw a TikTok that was women. It was describing how there's this trend going around where there was an audio on TikTok that was trending because it was Amber Heard describing being sexually assaulted by Johnny Depp, and it was basically other women acting out her words, like lip syncing essentially, but giving it an inflection to communicate that, oh, I would love if Johnny Depp did this to me, which made my skin crawl, as it should do to any human being with any tiny bit of
decency,
empathy. Yeah. So I kind of looked into from there. I would say that, like, the kind of, there are definitely elements there where it does seem like Amber Heard specifically responded to Johnny Depp's abuse at various points and acted in a way she's not proud of in that way. She's spoken at length about how she regrets some of the ways she communicated with him and some of her physical responses to his abuse. But this seems to be one of the most well-documented cases of domestic abuse by a man of a woman of all time. She has extensive amounts of photos, text messages. The text messages that he sent Paul Bettany, I will never watch anything with Paul Bettany again. That man is a scum human. He received texts from Johnny Depp saying that he wanted to. I'm not gonna say those words. It is disgusting. If you want to look them up, I'm not going to be watching anything with either of those two men in my entire life. I've never watched an Amber Heard movie. I have no idea what she's about. If we are suggesting that this woman does not have enough evidence to suggest that she's been domestically abused, no one has enough evidence. It is setting the bar so high for victims of domestic abuse. It is terrifying. Additionally, the case is specifically about Johnny Depp. He is suing Amber Heard for having written an op-ed in which he said that she became a representative of victims of domestic abuse or domestic violence, which it was put to trial in the UK a couple of years ago, and a judge found that 12 out of 14, or I think maybe 14 out of 16 potentially, instances of domestic abuse were demonstrably the case, that there was significant evidence to suggest that that had happened, and two, they couldn't corroborate, which so that Johnny Depp could not sue the Mail, the Daily Mail at that time. Which, I mean, I don't really care if people sue the Daily Mail, but the UK, in which there is a very strong protection for, or it's very. It's much harder to sue someone for libel in the US than it is the UK. So if he could have achieved success anywhere, it should have been in the UK.
Yeah, the threshold gets very low for libel in the UK.
Exactly. Yeah. So in that instance, a judge found, and it was overturned. It went to appeal twice, and both instances was upheld that no, this man, because the Daily Mail called him a wife beater, and 3 different levels of the legal system said yes, this man has beaten his wife. It's terrifying. I really implore you as a person, if you are somewhat on the fence about this, if you are like, it kind of seems like they're both bad people. It seems like they both kind of did awful things. I would suggest go watch Princess Week's video on YouTube, Weekes. It's about kind of just the culture of true crime, like backseating, where people feel like they can solve cases from their front room. And how that's infected people's brains to perceive this kind of case as being something that they can tell something about themselves, specifically because it's being televised. And I'd also recommend Cancel Me Daddy episode about Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. I know it's a podcast, specifically Michael Hobbs is on it as a guest, who Michael Hobbs does Maintenance Phase.
I think you're wrong about for a long time.
You're wrong about.
He's an exceptional, I think, journalist, but also an exceptionally logical and clear communicator as well. Yep,
and this is a man who has basically did a podcast entirely about how specifically talks about how Nicole Byrne-Simpson or say Monica Lewinsky or Tonya Harding, how these women were hugely done dirty by like modern culture in the way that we talked about the abuse they faced at the hands of men, and how we basically made them into the subject of like tabloid like fodder, when realistically they were victims of abuse. And we are currently looking at that same thing happening again. It's bizarre that in the same 6 months that like Free Britney was a thing and everyone was like celebrating this, that we were also going down the road of like abusing this woman in real time. It's terrifying. Do not like it. Yeah, no, that was really heavy, but I know I felt...
No, it needs to be said, and I think that if we're going to be, if we have been and we want to be a podcast which cares about these kind of things, you have to speak about when necessary. Yep. Yeah.
I think there's also been a large contingent of people who have, with positive intentions, gone into it trying to suggest that like it needs to be highlighted that men can be victims of domestic violence as well, which I totally agree. Of course, men can be victims of domestic violence. I don't think there's any indication in this situation that has been the case.
Well, I think my only thought on this is I think this is a real example where people really struggle with nuance and they struggle with multiple things happening at the same time. So they like a clear narrative where one person is clearly the bad guy, where one person has done nothing wrong. Yeah. And it has to be either or. And you can have a situation where proportionality, where like, yes, Amber Heard potentially has done things which are not agreeable, which she shouldn't have done. But the proportion of that to what's happened to her is not comparable, and people like to compare things like for like.
Well, I mean, like if nothing else, I mean, like one of the, I think responding to domestic violence, in a way that is distasteful. I ask you to find a victim of domestic violence who hasn't done that. I mean, we require women to be perfect victims to believe them. Fuck that nonsense. Honestly, let's move on. Yeah. I think.
Absolutely.
I feel shaky. Ugh.
That's okay. It's a real thing. Yeah,
it is a real thing,
and we have to engage with it honestly. So I'm not going to transition. I am going to say that we're about to start talking about Buffy the Vampire Slayer now, though.
Yeah, absolutely. Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
So this is our second last episode in the great ranking of Buffy the Vampire Slayer episodes, and we're going to go from episode the 12th highest ranked in our rankings to the 6th highest ranked.
Yep. Okay, and at number 12 is The Prom, season 3, episode 20, and Joel initially rated this 9.8 ineffective umbrellas,
and Brian rated it 9.5 Buffy and Angels Forever. So do you have a distinct memory of this this episode.
Yeah. What do you mean?
I'm joking because we watched it like the other day.
Okay, yeah. I thought you meant like, historically succinct.
Yeah, so it was actually fun to kind of revisit and kind of see how these episodes look in comparison to more recent stuff. And what I thought was really engaging about it, and which speaks to why it's so highly rated, is it's kind of like a perfectly structured episode without ever having to be too grand or too big, because in terms of what happens in the episode, it's not really a whole lot. It's like there's the issue with if you write down the bullet points of what happened, there's the issue with the fact that Tucker's brother, or Andrew's brother Tucker, the originating incident, has these hellhounds that he wants to release at the prom. There's various conversation around who's going to prom and getting dresses and all that kind of stuff. There's Buffy accepting the fact that she's not going to be able to enjoy her prom because she has to deal with this situation. And then in the end, she gets to go, despite the conversation with Angel about the fact that they have, I think this is the break up in the sewer essentially in this episode, where they kind of say it's not going to work out because he's so old and etc. It all comes together at the prom. She deals with the problem and she has her moment and people recognize her for it, and that's kind of it. It's actually like there's not like 7 or 8 scenes of really emotional dialogue, but what is there just works really really cleanly and really gently, I think, in terms of what it presents.
I agree. It is it's a good episode to show. I'm just kidding. It's a great episode. It is very well written, for one thing. The Buffy and Angel breakup, it's heartbreaking, it's sad. It's, I think, a well-written conclusion to a doomed relationship that has been clearly communicated as doomed from quite an early point, which I think is a strong writing point, if you get me. Like, I think this ending to Buffy and Angel, where we understand that this can't be... it could be easy to read it as, well, listen, they want to get Angel over to another TV show, so they'd be making double the amount of money. I think ultimately, though, what's communicated here about him needing to give her a chance to live her life, to recognize that they're not doing good stuff for each other. It's good writing, it's interesting, it's upsetting.
And crucially, what I'd forgotten about this episode is this is precipitated by Joyce going to talk to Angel in the mansion and saying she's in love with you as any young girl will be, but she's a life ahead of her, she's going to make choices, and if she can't, you have to make them for her. Like, that is that's a relationship which I think is really underexplored in some ways, Joyce and Angel, but I actually thought it was quite an affecting scene, and it speaks to Joyce being a well represented parent character. I think she's not just like the strict mom that we remember saying you can't be going out slaying, etc. Yeah, absolutely.
And I think it's she's right ultimately. Most importantly, like, he shouldn't be going out with her, and that's great. It's great, well communicated. There's just so many like lovely points about this episode. You have things like Xander, like, I mean, I don't think he does it as an apology, but I'm going to read it as an apology because he should be apologizing. He buys Cordelia her dress that she's been working at this shop to try to work off basically in time for prom.
Yeah, this is where he comes in and thinks she's just shopping, right?
Yeah. Because he's a bastard. But he basically buys her a dress, and that's a kind, sweet, like, final moment between the two of them. You have a lot of very nice moments with Anya, where her and Xander basically start going out in this episode because she communicates that he is one of the less annoying humans, which I think really is the beginning of her deeply misunderstanding humanity. And then I like the approach that Buffy takes in this episode, where she says, listen, I am not going to let this destroy all of your proms. I'm going to take care of this myself. And going from that to being the to getting it all sorted, she gets Tucker's like hell dogs, what they call hellhounds, all wrapped up, and then changing into her beautiful dress and getting to go to the prom. And then first off, having her I'm not sure if this is which order it goes in, but having her dance with Angel, where he says, I'm going to be leaving, but of course I'm not going to let you go to your prom by yourself, and I love you. Like, he obviously, it's a very sad end of a relationship because it's clear that they're still deeply in love. And then having the moment with Jonathan giving her the umbrella, which entirely breaks me. I wept. I think I wept at both.
I always thought that umbrella was like expensive. or like fancy, but everyone seems to understand that umbrella as kind of tacky, or like heartwarming, but like thrown together by the prom committee or whatever. So yeah, there's
which I think is probably an experience of the US, is where, like, you know, those kind of things that you're given by the prom committee are probably not like expensive.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I like the way that the monster of the week, such as it is specifically tied in with the prom. Like, so Tucker is training them to attack people in formal wear, and that's how you get it tied in with Cordelia initially being attacked in the prom shop or the dress shop. And I think that, like, those little beaks of like not making all these things separate but kind of working together well is, like, I think part of the craft of a really good episode. But also I think very core to the messaging around Buffy, and of course that kind of storytelling when Buffy's like, you know, why did you want to kill and murder all these people? And Tucker's like, I have my reasons. I cooks away to him asking a girl to go to the prom with him, and she says no, and that's it.
It's so funny.
But it's also so, like, true to the spirit of what we're trying to talk about here. And Buffy handing the umbrella to Giles. Yeah, so it's Angel must come in second, because I remember specifically she's talking to Giles and he takes the umbrella out of her hand so she can go over and dance with Angel. And him, like, Giles just in general, been very proud of her through the episode. But we recognize that was such a significant moment in the story, that after 3 seasons of apparently no one in this town really noticing all the horrible things, Jonathan being like, we all kind of know this has been happening, and we don't really want to talk about it, but we don't, and also that we never really got to know you very well as a person, but we know you saved us. And yeah, like, it's absolutely heartwarming, you know?
I really like it. Okay, next up at number 11 we have, and this is going to be a controversial one, Once More with Feeling, season 6 episode 7, and Joel initially rated this 10 prehensile demon chins out of 10,
and Brian rated it 10 crullers out of 10.
I'm not sure.
It's a kind of a pastry, I think, isn't it, in America?
No, it's a cronut.
A cronut, I think a cruller might be as well.
I believe you. So what's there to be said about Once More with Feeling? As we've already said, these like 12 episodes are 10 out of 10s. It is just a matter of preference about where we've rated these episodes. I love Once More Feeling, and it was a real revelation this watch through, in terms of, like, you know, I kind of felt like I'd gotten inured to it. I thought I was kind of done with it. I was like, oh, I know it all inside out. It gets shown every second minute and you have to watch it. It's very good. It's very, very good in terms of the music. It's very good in terms of how it fits in with the rest of the season. It's very good about how it communicates themes and character development, which is unusual. It is the just the standalone most perfect musical episode that any show has done that is not a musical. Everything else pales in comparison. I can't think of anything worth noting other than this. It is a format breaking episode in a really positive way. It is fun, like silly, dark. The moment where Buffy says that she came down from heaven, incredibly upsetting, is really good. Yeah,
so I think Once More Feeling is top of the top list for people for a lot of reasons, and I think mainly because it's so complete. Like, you can lift that out. Here's a musical episode. It's so memorable, it's so impactful, it's such an achievement, and that absolutely is there. Like, we have the vinyl, we have a poster up on the wall here in the house.
I've looked up, so I have the vinyl. My siblings got it for me for my 30th birthday, which is incredibly kind of them. I looked this up recently. I put it into Discogs, which is a vinyl like discussion site. Apparently it's worth like €300.
Jesus.
They got it for me for like 30 or something. So
we love a bargain.
Yeah, it's really cool. Anyway, go on.
I had that CD as well somewhere.
CDs are worth nothing.
Just incidentally, I'm like, where's my CD? So it's wonderful. So I think the episodes that are higher here are from personal preference, and also just maybe stronger episodes from a story point of view, which is, I think, where our heart is. But I love watching Once More Feeling, and definitely the thing that I really valued on this watch through was, yes, it actually works exceptionally well as an episode of the TV show as well. It's not an interlude. The heart of a genre device like this, and many episodes use it, is putting them in inhuman circumstances to force character development that would not otherwise happen, and they're forced to sing, or they're forced to explain, and so on, which is really masterfully done. It's
fascinating take on musicals. It's like, you know, what if the musical format was like this like twisty bad thing because it made you reveal things you didn't want to communicate about yourself. That's interesting and good and well written.
Yeah, it communicates almost like that classic kind of Twilight Zone-y, you know, I have no mouth, but I must sing, almost kind of thing. Like the horror of it. It is a horror episode, ultimately. And I think that off the top of my head, there's many songs I love off this. There's many songs that live rent free in my head. There's no song I think I don't like.
I don't like the Spike song.
I like the Spike song a lot. Just because it's so stupid. I love that everyone has their own style. I love that not everyone in the cast is necessarily primarily a singer.
You know what my favorite part of this episode is
Alison Hannigan?
No, it is Amber Benson walking into a pole accidentally while doing the Life's a Game and We Must Play a Part, and then like clearly losing her shit and trying to get back into the rhythm.
It's there's an element of, I think, hard work in this episode that you don't see in television now, where all those edges are kind of polished out of it a little bit. And
you know what I'm going to do, actually? Let's for the rest of this discussion talk about why it's not higher, because I think that's more interesting potentially.
Yeah, sure.
Because I would say that, like, you know, for me, maybe I consider myself a little bit of a Buffy purist, especially when I look at our like top 5. Buffy at its, well, like, then again, like, we have a couple of like format breaking ones there. Buffy for me at its best is doing something which is quiet sometimes and like incredibly good and not flashy. It is showing characters dealing with difficult things in ways that are honest and odd and scary. And this episode, I think, while it has moments of brilliant humanity, I think it does have a sheen which makes it a little unlovable.
Yeah, maybe not even unlovable, but just it doesn't need our love in the same way.
Yeah, I think so too.
It's a very confident episode, and I think, I agree. What draws me to an episode is, I think, if you look at everything from Everything Everywhere All at Once to Buffy, to anything I like, what really distills it down is moments of, for me, a moment of vulnerability which becomes strength. Yeah, like almost everything I've ever loved at media culminates in a point like that. And this is not that. I don't think anyone is at risk emotionally in this episode, even though the Buffy's obviously devastated. She's already devastated, you know? Yeah. Amber Benson's character Tara finds out about the stuff with Willow. That's all exceptionally communicated, but that was already kind of on the way out. You know, there's already issues there. So like, it just doesn't have that moment of absolute focus. But that being said, actually, not to underestimate that there is obviously the lesbian flying sex moment in this as well, you know.
No, yeah, that's great.
So I really enjoyed the episode, really confident episode, but not a gut punch.
Yep. Okay. Next up at number 10, we have Innocence, season 2, episode 14. Joel initially rated this 10 bruised vampire testicles out of 10.
And Brian rated it 10 man toys. Do you intentionally misspell testicles in this?
No.
Because technically it says I rated it 10 bruised vampire testicles.
I think I don't know how to spell testicles. So this episode is part of the two-parter at the heart of Buffy. Just heart, I would say. It is the episode where Angel has turned into Angelus, and Buffy has to deal with that. It is, in some ways, I kind of feel like we have to talk about it in terms of why this is here and not Surprise. We'll talk about Surprise. Obviously, it's higher up than this. When we get to it, I have a lot of love for that episode. I think Surprise is the unusual and creative, artistic, and kind of poetic one of these two, and Innocence is the bombastic, explosive,
literally,
kind of dark, grim sister to it. It does a really good job of that, though. So you have at the beginning of the episode, like Angel, like feeding on a sex worker to show that he is Angelus, and you have various points through it, like him. Do you remember the scene where he basically finds Buffy and pretends to be Angel and tries to break her heart by saying that she was nothing special and that basically he doesn't love her, and then he just said that to to pretend, basically, that kind of stuff. You have then one of my favorite action scenes of Buffy of all time, where you have Buffy, because you have in the background of all this, you have the
judge. The
judge coming back because they've reassembled his body.
So the judge is a great threat in this middle part of the season. There is this, like, it's one of the first, like, an unkillable thing, and you feel going into this situation that one of the greatest resources we have is we have Angel on our side. So that is kind of where it works, is that having him switch sides suddenly makes the whole thing feel incredibly vulnerable, aside from Buffy obviously being emotionally very vulnerable. And like, yeah, they have that confrontation, which is at the moment so effectively epic and also so 90s in maybe a mall set, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And you have that incredible framing at the end of the episode for the fight scene where Buffy rallies her strength and goes to confront, and you have the judge at the top of the stairs, Drew and Spike beside him, and Angel's there as well.
No, I think
because all three of them went to basically, and that
they all jump away while he gets exploded.
Yeah, but that is a fantastic shot. All three of them being like, it mirrors for me kind of, you know, like seeing where Angelus gets attacked by Giles with the 2x4 later on. There's just sense of them underestimating the Scoobies. 100%. And the three of them having to jump out of the way is like a really impactful moment. And I think there's something so quintessentially Buffy about Buffy being like, you know, this isn't a weapon that was forged in medieval times. It's a rocket launcher. Yeah.
And then what you have is Buffy stalking Angel through the crowds while he's fleeing, and them having a throwdown in the
lobby of the cinema. I remember this.
Yeah, and I think it's raining essentially because of the sprinklers.
Yeah.
And there's lots of beautiful water imagery throughout the 2 episodes.
Buffy kicks him in the nuts.
Buffy basically realizes she can't kill him, so she kicks him in the nuts, and then she determines that next time she is going to kill him. In a moment which is like, you have in this episode Buffy at her absolute lowest and rallying, which is an important facet of this character.
Yeah.
Consistently throughout. It's exciting, it's a fun episode, it is grim and dark. You know, you have Angel killing Jenny Calendar's uncle in this episode, and he like writes in the wall in his blood, "Was it good for you?" or something like that.
Yeah, so like,
really terrifying shit.
Up until this point, we've heard and we've had good build up to how terrifying Angel used to be before he was so lovable, and like, my God, does this actually like deliver on that? The Angel is the character that has contained the potential in this show for how terrifying vampires actually are, and the whole relationship turns on the fact that he seems so wonderful now, and there's this menace of what he could be, and it has to be good for that ever to make sense again. And like, this is such a great expression of that. Yep,
100%. I love this episode. I love this 2-parter, and it's great. And I would just say that I prefer Surprise. And we'll get into why when we're talking about that. Okay, next up at number 9, we have Becoming Part 2, Season 2, Episode 22. Joel initially rated this 9.8 leather pants.
And Brian rated it 10 stupid little trolls.
Okay, so Joel, what do you remember of this episode?
Yeah, so Becoming Part 2, the conclusion of Season 2, which I think we'll talk about season rankings, but for some people Season 2 is probably their favourite season of the TV show, favourite season of TV ever. If you think of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, if you're a fan anyway, the first thing that will probably come to mind is Buffy having to kill Angel just after he was reinsouled to save the world. It is one of the most famous and impactful moments in television history ever, and I think that entire arc is it's up there for me with stuff like, which we actually don't care about, but stuff like who shot J.R. and that kind of stuff. You know, it's really memorable in that way. I think you have this incredible culmination where Buffy is on the run for supposedly killing Kendra. You have her entire support system starting to fall apart. She's coming to terms with what she has to do with Angel, and you have her confrontation with Joyce, where you have this incredible metaphor
where she's working with Spike, which also brings a lot of humor, where Spike and Joyce like kind of like meet again, and he's like, "Oh, I remember you," and she's like, "Oh, get away from my..."
Yeah, get away from my dog, or as she essentially comes out to Joyce, and Joyce says, you don't get to be a slayer, and Buffy's like, well, like, I have to, and she's like, if you do, don't come back to this house. And this moment where Buffy's like, well, I have to do this. This is who and what I am. I think the start of the relationship with Spike and Buffy in this way, where they have to work together and showing the difference between Spike and Angel, I think this episode starts Spike as the character he needs to be to continue on in the show, so maybe that's a bad thing. Anyway. Yeah, you have this like contrast where Spike says, a lot of vampires talk about ending the world, but like Angelus actually will do it. And yeah, you have Giles captured and tortured, and you have Jenny or Drusilla appearing to him as Jenny. And there's a great mix of comedy in there as well.
Where you have like Drusilla like basically making out with Giles in the end, and it's just like, okay.
But then Xander frees him, and Giles is like, "You're just another apparition." And Xander's like, "If you were being hypnotized, you think you would imagine me?" He's like, "Okay, let's go." He just consistently hates Xander throughout this show.
Yeah.
And yeah, like the moment that we're building to is this incredible tension where Willow from her hospital bed does the first great magic she does on the show, a magic that doesn't come from reciting a spell, it comes from her. Like this is like her when power. She
stops doing this, like stops trying to do the spell, that it becomes magic.
And finally uses Jenny's floppy disk spell to restore Angel's soul, but it's too late, and Buffy has to
well, first off, Buffy, like you skipped over the part where Buffy and Angel are having the most important sword fight.
Oh no, let's come back to it.
Okay, great. Yeah.
But that's what we're leading to. And yeah, it could have been any kind of fight, but they actually had a situation where there's a full-on sword fight in this show, a plausible sword fight where Buffy is fighting Angel with a sword, and we're on board for this. And it is two star-crossed lovers tragically pit against each other for the fate of the world, and the dialogue is exceptional, it's punchy, and it all comes down to, what again at first glance might be one of my favorite moments in the show, in all television, which is Angel trying to kill her with the sword and Buffy catching a sword, and
it seems like she has nothing left. She has no one. She's on her own. She doesn't have a family anymore. She doesn't have friends anymore, and all she has is herself.
And that's enough. And what a message that is, what an experience that is. And I think, I'm trying to think of, there's other versions of this in media for certain, but this kind of moment communicates upwards to things like The Avengers, which Joss Whedon wrote, with this moment of that turn of this kind of epic, impactful about face, which has become very, very popular, I think, in many forms of like superhero films and media and all that. And I think this is one of the earliest, or maybe one of the strongest examples of that, which I think may have established that. And I love that moment. I think
I can think of like The Matrix also out in the same year, but like that's not as strong.
Yeah, like there's definitely like moments where it turns, and like the stuff with Neo, like is a good example of that. But there's something about this which I can't quite put my finger on, but I feel like I see it so much now, and I think it may have started here.
I agree. I love this episode. It is wonderful. It is, the moment with Buffy, and also just the very sad, quiet moment of Buffy realizing that like she has no choice but to kill Angel is just one of the most heartbreaking things you can commit to TV. It is the culmination of the greatest arc I know on TV.
Yeah, and the culmination of a long-running arc on this podcast, because in this episode, Xander lies to Buffy about what Willow said, that Willow said kick his ass instead of, the Angel's reinstalled.
And this isn't found out until season 7.
Yeah, but I think for the intervening seasons, you didn't think it ever came up again.
I think I did know, but...
Okay, maybe you were trolling me, but you're very adamant that that's not a thing.
Okay, so next up we have at number 8, Hush, season 4, episode 10. And Joel initially rated this 10 smashed boxes.
And Brian rated 10 orgasm friends.
What's there to say about Hush that hasn't already been said? It is wonderful. It is terrifying. I think it's another episode where we watch through it and we're like, oh, we're going to watch Hush next week. And that's exciting in some ways, but also like it's done to death. But we found it very rich, very enjoyable, very funny, very scary. Yeah. It is a great text. It is a masterpiece of horror.
Again, one of the few examples, like many episodes, many shows try to do something different or something novel with their storytelling format, an animated episode or something like that. But this justifies itself because this kind of stuff is always informed by the plot. There's a really strong Monster of the Week reason for why this is happening. It's not just a narrative device, and it's once again used to put our heroes into a position where they're forced to do things they wouldn't normally do, and forces character development. And actually, what's at the heart of this, one of the things is the tension between Riley and the secrecy of the initiative and Buffy's secrecy as a vampire slayer, which is actually one of the only interesting parts of that dynamic, I think, if you're going to focus on anything, and them trying to work together and trying to avoid each other. I think you could do any episode without sound, but to make this work so well and have everyone be so communicative is an exceptional achievement. The gentlemen are famously one of the scariest monsters that are ever on this show.
Yep.
Doug Jones, always great to see him.
Absolutely.
And for my money, pound for pound, the scene with Giles and the projector is the single funniest scene together in the show, between, you know, his awful drawing of Buffy, you know, the wanking, him playing the classical music, Buffy will patrol tonight, etc. And everyone in the scene is able to communicate their character without speaking.
It's an exceptional cast.
Yeah.
It's exceptional writing. It's exceptional horror. It's so good as an episode. I love it so much. It's so weird that season 4 has so many strong episodes for such a weak season.
Yeah, great music as well. With music carries a lot of the silent scenes in it.
100%. No, the music in it is beautiful. The romantic moment in it with Riley and Buffy, where they finally do kiss, and like, you know, this episode, like, you know, it is deeply indebted to fairy tales, which I think is a trope that Buffy uses very well. It's really good, and very importantly, Joel, extreme queer content. You have Tara and Willow holding hands in a moment of like meeting properly for the first time and being able to work together to move the vending machine in front of the door. That's incredible. That stuff is exhilarating and wonderful. Yeah,
and I think episodes like this where Buffy doesn't have her usual abilities, you know, in the sense that she relies on her punning, her communication, her linguistic tactician abilities, similar to Helpless, similar to things like we're saying about in Becoming Part 2, where she is reduced in this way. It's important to communicate that she's more than just her special abilities, that the essence of what she can do is in Buffy and Summers, and in the rest of the cast. And also, this episode weirdly has Olivia in it, who's only in 2 episodes, I think, but you feel like she was a main character for the whole season, you know? So yeah, Hush, I think, continues to be, while a very important episode for the progression of season 4, could easily be taken out and shown by accepting, often has been, and I think that's like such a fine line to walk.
It really is. Next up at number 7, we have Lie to Me, season 2, episode 7, and Joel initially rated this 9.5 nests of tumors.
And Brian rated it 10 Hemeries, Hemery being Buffy's original high school. So I think equally, 2 things. One, this is one we also rewatched not drunkenly recently, but
though we had this rated up here before that.
Yeah, no, 100%. But I think this is one that is a surprising favorite of ours. I think we're big. We go to bat for this episode, and it doesn't necessarily turn up on a lot of lists.
Yeah, I think that people would be like, oh, this is a good one, but like not necessarily, you know, number 7 best Buffy episode. I'm like, you know, is it better than Becoming Part 2? Maybe not, but we're making a point here.
Yeah, and it means more to us, maybe. So I think this is the episode where Buffy's out of town friend from her previous high school moves to town, and there's all this tension between them clearly having a prior relationship and getting on well, him just knowing her better than the Scoobs currently do at that point in season 2, and underneath this, we have Spike there as a really kind of dark and menacing presence in the town, and Billy, the friend, we eventually discover wants to knows that Buffy is a slayer, wants to be sired because he has terrible brain cancer and is going to die very young. And Buffy's interaction with this, decision on what to do, and the kind of really tragic ending of it, it's a haunting, gothic, emotional episode on a shoestring of a budget in many ways.
Yeah, there's nothing special about any effects in this episode. There's nothing special about the staging of it. It is purely in the storytelling and in the dialogue. Billy, for me, is one of the most important shadow selves of Buffy. He is a person who is doomed, and yet decide. Yeah, he's a person who is doomed, and his response to that is to respond selfishly and to try to fight against an inevitability in a way that is not rallying for other people, but instead putting other people at risk. And Buffy in this episode is the perfect response to that, where she says, in the face of this terrifying existential nightmare of not having any ability to respond to things, but not knowing what to do, I choose to fight anyway, and I choose to try to help the people around me. And that's the premise of Buffy, is that at its heart you have a main character who is a hero, not because she expects a reward, but because she has a deep sense of duty.
Yeah.
The conversation that she has on the rafters with him in the when they're waiting for the vampires, where he says, "What choice do I have?" And she says, "No, you don't have a choice, but like, or sorry, you don't have." I think he says, "There's no good choice to be made here." She says, "No, there isn't a good choice to be made here, but you do still have a choice." It is a deeply existential communication. I think it's my favorite communication of philosophy in the entirety of the show. Potentially, it's really good. It is gripping, and the conclusion of the episode where he does come back. He's been sired, and she immediately stakes him, so it means nothing anyway. And you have the Giles Buffy "lie to me" speech is perfection. That is one of the best written exchanges in the entire. It is the best written exchange in the entirety of Buffy, I would say.
Yeah, and there's loads of really rich content here. So obviously Billy Forgam, or Forg, is played by Jason Behr of Roswell fame, who I think could have been a main character on this show. In a sense, like I think he had the capacity to be like an ongoing character. I thought he fit in really well with the dynamic.
True, big gay book one.
Yeah. You learn, I think, so much more about characters in this episode. So I think this is a really good one to show how the vampires in the Buffyverse are not like your regular vampires, because you have all this contrast with people who see them as the lonely ones, the walkers of the night, and the whole Anne Rice kind of fan club stuff going on. It's like, no, vampires are monsters here, and I think that is a very necessary, horrific injection. I think them being trapped in the basement and the door not opening is really monstrous and really horrible. And it's an image that Buffy returns to. In this, we also see some complication of the angel character. Some complication of the angel character in terms of, for want of a less racist word, humanizing him, because he goes into Willow's bedroom and asks her to use the internet, which he does not understand, to find out more about Ford because he's jealous. He goes to the club to try and find out, and there's one of my favorite subtle little jokes, which is when he says, all of these are just like Anne Rice wannabes, and they've no idea how vampires look or dress, and a man walks by dressed exactly as he is currently dressed, and that kind of stuff. And I think that softens the character in an interesting way. The relationship between Giles and Buffy and that speech is such a signal of what this show can be and is. It's like, when I saw that for the first time, you see, it's like, why is this show like this? Is elevated again. Next level, absolutely. Genuinely tragic, and as you so accurately, I think, pointed out, that Buffy is on as much of a clock as Forg is. Like, she's already died once by this point, and it's about retaining. The show's about retaining your humanity when there are reasons not to. Yeah.
That's a beautiful way to put it, Joe. Okay, next up, and for the last one for this episode, at number 6 is Graduation Day Part 2. Joe initially rated this 10 dead gay jocks out of 10.
And Brian rated it 9.7 scar tissues out of 10.
So, Graduation Day, I think we've spoken at length about it previously, because we already rated Graduation Day Part 1.
So, yeah, obviously this is the culmination of so many things. It's the combination of the Faith and Buffy arc. It's the combination of the conflict with the mayor. It's the end of the entire high school experience. Cordelia leaves the show. Angel leaves the show. Many characters die. It is stand aside kind of end game. This is like the coming together of plot points for me. So we start off with obviously the aftermath of Buffy having stabbed Faith, and it kind of leads to Buffy having lost this option for saving Angel using Slayer's blood, going to the mansion where Angel is about to die and insisting that he drinks from her. And that in itself is such a potent image after everything they've gone through in season 2 and him coming back in season 3, and nearly drains her. She ends up in the hospital simultaneously. Faith is brought there after a stab wound. The mayor expresses maybe one of his only real moments of vulnerability, and I don't even mean like sensitivity. I mean like that he is damaged by what Buffy has done to Faith. Is very upset over Faith, comes in, tries to smother Buffy in her bed, tells Angel he's going to kill Angel and his whore, but sets up this like real like we have to kill this guy kind of thing. It's not just an existential problem, like this guy is the enemy. And you have so much like apocalyptic the night before the fall kind of imagery. You have Cordelia and Wesley having their terribly uncomfortable kiss together, which is like a bit ick, but like it's also quite funny. And what it leads to is this incredibly epic confrontation where you have all the banter, you have all the jokes during the commencement speech, you've all the humor about that. You have Wesley, which I think is a very, again, humanizing moment, is he, even though Buffy has disavowed the council, he says he's going to stay and fight anyway. And the mayor starts his commencement speech, turns into Demon Olvacan, and immediately eats Snyder. I feel like the image of the mayor's head splitting into a snake is really like burned into my brain as well. And in a moment that I think still it's totally earned, but I don't see coming, everyone turns around and the entire class is armed to the teeth, essentially.
The entire graduating class has flamethrowers.
Yeah, flamethrowers. Vampires. Oh yes, there's an eclipse as well, so vampires march on the school, and it seems like we're overwhelmed. Then from every direction it turns out that we've actually got them surrounded. The vampires try to run, and coming up one staircase, Angel is like leading a load of students as well. It's epic. It is so satisfying.
Yeah, it's a perfect pairing to Becoming Part 2, where Buffy has her like dark night of the soul, where she's alone, she has to fight purely by herself. In response, this episode is saying, no, as a response to this, we are all working together. We have all recognized what's happened here, and we are not doing this like apart from each other anymore. We are standing up against. It's a deeply Marxist sentiment. It's like, standing up against the establishment and against the patriarchal nonsense and violence that the mayor represents. And it's in a real kick-ass way.
Yeah,
it's really good, fun. It's exciting. It's dramatic. It's sad when you see like you see Larry and Harmony get killed, and then you see and the final image of Angel walking away into the smoke while like with one longing look at Buffy. Heartbreaking.
No, absolutely. And I think I could, it's such a rich text because I could get so Freudian about it, because the mayor turns into this big snake, and Buffy taunts him with the sword that he got for Faith, makes him chase her down the corridor into the womb of the library, and then she gets her father figure to blow it up. Like, there's so much going on, and yeah, the show does so many things like this and always does them well, in my opinion, but the quintessential one has to be that after 3 seasons, Giles blowing up the library, which is over the Hellmouth, and killing the mayor.
And then a really lovely moment at the end where I goes, God, I can't believe we survived that, and everyone's like, yeah, it's awful, I can't believe the whole thing happened, and we blew up the school, and he's like, no, I mean high school.
Yeah,
as a perfect send off to this perfect 2 seasons of TV.
Because the thing is, it always has to be with Buffy that the high school drama, the personal drama, feels just as end of the world as the actual end of the world. That's kind of the log line. That's the pitch for the series. It works. And it's perfect. It's perfect.
It's really, really good. Okay, that's us for this week. In terms of the rating of the episodes. Next week we have our top 5. You may be able to guess what's in there if you've been paying attention / if you have a spreadsheet. No surprises up there, really. Let's be real. But I'm very excited to talk about them. Okay, Joel, should we move into Cordelia Chase?
Yeah, so we have 2 lake stage Angel episodes, I would say, unusual episodes. First one was Time Bomb, and the premise of this episode is that Illyria in Freg's form is too powerful, is too unstable, and is not only losing control of herself, but is on the way to detonating with a supernatural nuclear explosion that's going to destroy the eastern seafront. So there's a lot of examination in the episode of, I suppose, the relationship between Illyria in this form, if she's starting to feel emotion, if she's starting to try to understand the human condition, how to control or engage with something which is so fundamentally not human and so fun. And I think they do a really good job of communicating just how ancient she is, that that not only is she an old demon, but it used to be that reality would quiver when she passed, and that she was the definition of rule. It was something very quintessential about it, which I think is communicated very well. We get some tomfoolery as she goes back and forth. Tomfoolery. She realizes that they're trying to, she thinks, kill her, and so we see her slaughter Angel, Spike, Wesley, and the other one, Lauren, and jumping back and forth between this and earlier conversations, pulling Angel through time, pulling Gung out of the hell dimension and bringing him back into the situation, and eventually it culminates with Wesley using a sci-fi plot device to turn her into a manageable regular character, essentially. So I think it's a reasonably fun and parsable adventure episode. I think that it probably would have worked better if this was a setup for a season 6, if you know what I mean, as a character that's going to live through season 6. So it's almost like time wasted a little bit when the only a few episodes left. But I think I'm appreciating, I've always fixated with Illyria on how it's a shame the Freg, the character, died. And what I want to focus on with this episode and with the remainder of the series is I think that Amy Acker does a really good job with the character she's giving of Illyria, and is distinct from Fred and does the relationships between them very well. So I don't know, maybe like a 6 or something.
Yeah, I was thinking 6 about how much
perfectly fine to watch.
Didn't do anything special.
Just didn't care, you know, but like nothing bad about it. And yeah, I think ultimately I like the idea of Illyria, even if I don't necessarily always like that it happened. And the next episode, the girl in question, is almost indescribable as an episode.
It was a fever dream.
It was a fever dream. Like essentially the premise is that Buffy and Spike buggy cop adventure.
Try again.
What am I saying? Angel and Spike?
Yeah, Angel
and Spike, sorry. Angel and Spike find out that they have to go to Italy for something. And also, incidentally, Buffy is also in Italy, and Buffy is potentially in trouble. And they think she's in trouble because she has become in contact with another vampire called the Immortal, who Angel and Spike, which we've never heard of before, who they claim is their arch enemy. And he's perfect. He has in the past managed to capture both of them, managed to sleep with Drusilla and Darla at the same time, has climbed Mount Everest several times, has written a life-changing book, has gotten Spike arrested for tax evasion, which is my favourite one, to be honest. It's comedy from start to finish. Absolute farce. It is the most farcical episode of Buffy and Angel. They travel to Italy. There's a lot of very racist understanding of what Italy is like for a lot of it, and also 2 or 3 times they just explicitly slur against the gypsy people, just unnecessarily. And Andrew's in this episode, and we get hear a lot about how Buffy is doing post season 7 from Andrew, who has, you know, a few gags and a few bits about how, you know, cool he is now, etc. They're constantly trying to catch up with the Immortal and Buffy. They almost see her in a club. It's an examination of their collective relationship with Buffy, and the kind of polyamorous threesome that they're in, because even at the end, Andrew's like, she loves both of you, and they constantly refer to her as our girl. Yeah, it's a whole thing going on.
It's not. Yeah, go on.
Like, I find this episode almost unrateable because I don't know why it happened, and if you take any of it seriously, it kind of really
there's a part with Angel and Spike on a Vespa.
Yeah, and it really cheapens a lot of things, but like I can see that they're trying so hard to have fun.
Yeah.
And there are, like, both James Marsters and David Boreanaz are funny actors, and I enjoy that. Tom Lenk is a funny actor. That's all there.
Didn't like the part where they implied that Andrew is actually straight.
Yeah. So famously, there's a scene which was originally written for Dong's character, where Andrew says people change and grow, you should try it, and then leaves with 2 beautiful women, and it does make it seem like that he's been converted, but I honestly, I feel like that is not the intention of it. It was just I think it was just a poorly edited episode. So like I think I have to say like 5.
I was gonna say 7.
I don't know.
I'm not offended by it. Well, I am kind of, but I'm not offended that it exists at any point. It's silly and stupid and fun.
I was considering a 7 until I thought about 2 things. One was there was just like a lot of racism in it.
Yeah, okay, 6 at most. Yeah, you're right.
There's a lot of racism, and also having now come to really full circle and think, okay, season 7 is a really solid conclusion to the Buffy stories, and for me personally, I'm like the comics and is a kind of, you know, an alternate continuity, etc. What this episode kind of implies about Buffy, that she's just partying with the immortal, and how Andrew is now, and all that, it's slightly cheap, I think, a little bit.
I agree with that.
So I'll meet you on a 6, because I don't think it's a bad episode. I just think it is like the show that should not go this full comedy. And actually, do you know what I've completely skipped over? Which will bring it up to a 6.
Yeah,
there's a second plot line, which is that Fred's parents come to Wolfram Heart, and Illyria pretends to be Fred to avoid the grief, and does a good job of playing Illyria as Fred, etc. But how tragic that is, that they essentially don't realise that their daughter has died. So that is good, but it also doesn't marry at all with the comedy of the episode. Those two things completely are happening unrelated to each other. So yeah, a 6 for that.
Okay, great.
Okay. So, folks, we come now to the end of the penultimate episode of this incarnation of Buffy Boys. And next week we will be rating our... Actually, no, we have 2 more episodes left.
Yeah.
And the anti-penultimate episode. So we have come full circle to your point. The anti-penultimate episode. And so next week we'll be rating our top 5 episodes and discussing. And then following that we will...
do the Buffy movie and rank all the seasons.
Absolutely. So, folks... thank you for joining us as always. We hope you enjoy. We hope you like to listen. If you enjoyed this episode, as always, please let us know. Tell your friends. Tell your ex who is just out of sight in the distance, and maybe you can catch up to them if you keep trying. And we will see you next time, right here on Buffy Boys.
See ya.
See ya.